Hi, welcome to Low-Carb Me'n'u. I'm Alexander, and today we're making Fatbombs, peanut butter mousse with chocolate glaze. These rich and decadent fat bombs are a fantastic dessert or a great ice-cold snack on a hot summer day. In this video, we'll make both versions, frozen bonbons that require a bit of time to make and an easy-to-make dessert. To make these treats, we need some staple ingredients: whipping cream, eggs, coconut oil, erythritol, and the two-star flavors, peanut butter and fresh mint. Let's start by mincing the mint leaves. We only want to use the leaves, no stalks. Get that as finely chopped as you can, so you don't have a leafy experience when eating the mousse. The combination of peanut butter and mint may be new to you, but trust me, they unexpectedly go exceedingly well together. A combination of earthy and savory with fresh that isn't overpowering and really shines in the frozen bonbons. So don't knock it until you've tried it. Now that we have our only cutting prep done, we're going to make the flavor sauce. In a regular mousse, you'd melt chocolate and incorporate that, but we're making peanut butter mint magic. In a saucepan, melt the coconut oil over medium-low heat. Once all melted, you add in the peanut butter and mint and stir these all together. You don't need to overly mix these, but be careful not to burn this sauce. We want it warm enough to get the flavors out, but not crisp or burn the mint. If you hear a bit of a sizzle, you need to remove it from heat. While the sauce cools to room temperature, we're going to make the base of the mousse. Start by separating the 3 eggs, placing the whites in a bowl big enough for whisking. Set the yolks aside and bring out your trusty hand mixer. Add the erythritol to the egg whites and whisk until you get nice soft peaks. Then grab your yolks and using a tiny whisk, thank you Babish for the wonders of tiny whisking, whisk these eggs until you have a homogeneous creamy texture. Eggs ready, onto the final ingredient. Get yourself a nice big bowl to whip the cream. It needs to be big enough to add all the ingredients together. But first, get that cream all whipped up, but don't turn it into butter. Now put all your machinery aside, as we need to have a bit of a gentle touch to incorporate all of the ingredients. To make a mousse, you want to retain all the airiness that you put into the cream and eggs. Start by adding the yolks and gently fold them in. The cream will become a bit runny and smooth. It doesn't have to be perfect, there's plenty of time for more folding. Then add in the peanut sauce. Make sure it's room temperature or colder. You can pop it in the fridge or freezer for a couple of minutes if you need to. As long as it stays liquid, you can use it. If you put it in hot, you'll cook the eggs and melt the cream. Gently fold it in. Finally add in the egg whites. Start with about a third of the whites and gradually add more. Fold in the egg whites gently, as these are what brings the air into the mousse. After all of the egg white is incorporated, you need to have a nice fluffy mousse with no streaks of egg white or peanut sauce. We need to put the mousse into molds. To make bonbons, you can use any shape you have or want to use. And if you're lacking silicone molds like these, you can also use an ice cube tray. To make the desserts, you can use a muffin tin and line it with paper, or just pour it into glasses. This recipe makes about 60 bonbons, or 12 servings as a dessert. Your mileage may vary depending on your bonbon mold size. Just start ladling in the mousse and fill the molds. We're using half of the mousse for bonbons and the other for the desserts. For the bonbons, we want to make sure that we have the molds neatly filled. Just use a scraper to move the mousse around to fill any holes and remove the excess. Repeat the process for as many molds as you want to fill. Then pop the molds into the freezer for at least an hour. The other half of the mousse will be put into the muffin tin. Just add some paper cups so you can actually remove the desserts later on. If you don't intend on eating all of them on the same day, I recommend glasses or bowls, as the paper will get a bit soggy over time. This has the added downside that the mousse will also be less firm. Just put the tray in the fridge so it can solidify. Once the mousse has set or is frozen, it is ready to be consumed. but we're going to add a chocolate glaze to give it a beautiful finish and complement it with that dark, bitter, chocolatey flavor. To make the chocolate glaze, we'll need whipping cream, high-quality cocoa powder, some erythritol, and gelatin sheets. The almonds are completely optional. Start by soaking the gelatin in water. The gelatin will add that shine we want from a mirror glaze and help solidify the coating. It's a fine line between making this a mirror glaze and turning it into a chocolate panna cotta, which you can also absolutely do. In a cold saucepan, we're going to make a chocolate paste. Just add the cocoa powder and erythritol. Then add in about a third of the whipping cream. Mix in the cream to turn it into a dry paste. Don't add too much whipping cream or you'll get a lumpy mix. Gradually add all the cream, incorporating it into the paste. It'll turn into a thick chocolatey liquid. It needs to be a bit runny. Depending on the quality of the cocoa powder, you might need a little more or a little less of the cream. And if you want, you can turn this into a lovely hot chocolate milk too. Just add more cream and leave out the gelatin. Put the saucepan on your stove. Give your gelatin a good squeeze to remove the excess water and add it to the pan. We're going to heat the chocolate until the gelatin is dissolved. No need to heat it all the way. The gelatin will do its work just fine once dissolved. Keep stirring to prevent the sauce from burning. Once the gelatin is incorporated, we're going to strain the sauce to remove any remaining lumps of cocoa powder. If you made the paste properly, you should barely have any lumps. Sifting the cocoa powder before may help, but you can still create lumps when making the paste. Let it cool down to room temperature. Ideally, you would get it down to somewhere between 25 and 30 degrees Celsius before we can work with it. Occasionally stir to prevent the skin from forming. Now, for our last and optional prep step, we're going to roast the almonds. Just gently roast them on medium heat in a dry pan, gently shaking them about. We want to give them a nice color and crunch. Move them to a cold plate once you're happy with them. Depending on how you want to use your almonds, you can count them and keep them whole, or chop them up. I'm doing a bit of both, so I'm taking 15 almonds and chopping the rest. You can use a food processor, just don't turn them into dust. With the mousse frozen, the glaze at room temperature, and the almonds cooled down, we're ready for final assembly. Make sure your mousse is properly frozen, as it will defrost really quickly. Have everything ready before you get them out of the freezer, as you'll want to work quickly. Remove the mousse from the mold and put it on a cold or frozen plate. Then have yourself a nice little assembly line. Mousse, glaze, almonds, and a baking paper lined tray to put them on. Use a spoon and fork to handle the bonbons, as the warmth of your fingers will only make them melt quicker. Use the tools to put a cube in the glaze. Make sure it's covered and then move it to the tray. The frozen cube will immediately help set the glaze. Put on an almond and move on to the next one. Don't try to fix any mistakes or move the bonbons, as it will ruin the glaze or deform them. It's quite a bit of work to go through all of them, especially if you're making 60 or more. If you notice your mousse is melting, just put them back in the freezer. If your glaze is starting to set, you can warm it up in the microwave. Just don't go too long. Once you're done with a single tray of bonbons, you should put them back in the freezer. We'll clean up the bonbons after they've frozen again. Repeat until you're done with all of the bonbons. The finishing touch for the desserts is a bit easier. All you have to do is make sure that your mousse has set and then divide the glaze over them. Just ladle it in and that's it. You can give these a finish with the chopped almonds any way you want. Just put them back in the fridge for serving later. With the bonbons frozen again, we're going to clean them up and move them to a serving tray or container for storage. You may notice that the glaze is not shiny anymore. Don't worry, a few minutes outside of the freezer will defrost the glaze and turn it glossy again. That also means we don't want to handle them with our hands to prevent fingerprints all over. Use a palette knife and a paring knife to remove them from the baking paper. You may want to cut away any excess glaze, and if they stick to the paper, you can use the knife to loosen them. then lift and shift to a serving plate. I prefer these bonbons frozen. That way you first get the dark, bitter chocolate, followed by the peanut butter flavor, and then finally the freshness of the mint. But you can also put them in the fridge and let them completely defrost. Just keep in mind they will get sticky. As mentioned, this recipe makes 60 fat bonbons. Each one contains half a gram of carbs, 1 gram of protein, 4.5 grams of fat, and about 48 calories. If you're making these dessert sized, you'll have 12 servings, with each one containing 2.3 grams of carbs, 5 grams of protein, 23 grams of fat, and 238 calories. Thank you for joining me on this flavorful low-carb adventure. Don't forget to explore my other recipes, and if you had a great time, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel for more tasty content. Until we meet again, keep cooking, stay low carb, and let your taste buds dance with delight.